Great, good morning. Hi everyone, my name is Karen Borrer. I'm Head of Corporate Communication at the ABPI, which is the Association of the British Pharmaceutical Industry. Thank you to Peter for inviting me along to speak to you today. I'm going to talk to you about Disclosure UK, what it is and why we're doing it. Simple answer is, it is a database. I could go home now, I've told you what it is. Actually, it's quite a lot more complex than that. And so I'm going to spend a couple of minutes talking to you actually about what it is and what's on it, and then answering the sort of slightly trickier question about why we're doing it. So, Disclosure UK is a database that shows payments made by the pharmaceutical industry to healthcare professionals, so doctors, nurses, dentists, healthcare organisations, so doctors' surgeries, healthcare trusts, and other relevant decision makers. So that's one that quite often people ask us about. So that is generally people who have an NHS position, not necessarily actually a healthcare professional, but they may have some influence over prescribing or purchasing of medicines. And we are showing payment, so a direct payment, so for a contracted piece of work, and also what we call benefits in kind. So that might be a payment to attend a symposium or some travel and accommodation associated with that. Together, those things are called transfers of value under the ABPI Code. This is a Europe-wide initiative, so there are 33 countries delivering this under the EFPIA and the ABPI Code. Only 3 countries are delivering it in the way that we are in the UK. So in the UK, what we're doing is collecting data from companies. We have 115 currently, and we are matching to one single data set. So when you see this database, hopefully what you will see as far as possible is one record per individual healthcare organisation or person, and you can see who they've worked with and the payments or benefits that they might have received. There are only 3 countries doing that. The rest of the countries are either doing it through legislation, so you may be familiar with the US Sunshine Act. Those sorts of laws are in places like France, where it's mandated. Or they're doing it through a gateway style in other countries where the association, similar to the ABPI, are pulling together just a set of spreadsheets. If that's not happening, what's happening in the rest of Europe is each individual company is putting a spreadsheet on its own company website. In the UK, we decided to take the decision back in around 2013 to pull together this database in this way, because what we wanted to do was make this as transparent as possible. So obviously for the end user, the member of the public looking for this information, 115 websites to search is actually quite a lot. You need to know that they exist, and then you need to find them. What we've done is pull it together and hopefully present it in a much more transparent way. And importantly here for this audience, this is something that pharmaceutical companies who abide by the Code of Practice, the ABPI Code of Practice, and they are signatories to that, they must do this every year. They must comply with the requirement to disclose this information annually to the ABPI. So the sorts of things here, I won't read this out entirely, but the sorts of things here that are covered in terms of the payments that are made. So participation in advisory boards, speaking on behalf of a company at a conference or symposia, those things would be disclosed at an individual level, as would the benefit in kind of your travel and accommodation related to an event that you went to for some education purposes. So that's for the individuals. For the organisations, we would be looking at things like sponsorships and grants, donations and things like that. Importantly, at the moment, anything that's relevant to research and development, which is mainly the clinical trials, that is shown as a total, and I'll come on to that shortly and show you a bit more information about how that pans out in terms of individual and total. So at the moment, we're showing one great big total for companies' expenditure on R&D. So we launched this last year. The data is shown effectively a year in arrears. So we launched in 2016 with 2015 data, and then in 2017 we're showing 2016 data, and in 2018 we'll be showing 2017 data on a rolling basis. So what you can see here is the amounts of money that have exchanged in terms of the disclosures that are relevant under the Code of Practice. So for the first year, you can see the total was 363 million. Last year, 454 million. So there is an increase, but what you can see here, this increase is driven by research and development. So I said to you that that's already shown in the aggregate. We can clearly see here there's been an increase in expenditure from UK pharma companies on research and development, so mainly surrounding clinical trials and activities related to those. What you can see here in the last graph is that has the other payments, so the individual payments for things like speaking at symposia and advisory boards, are actually fairly static. That hasn't really changed. Obviously, we're going to have, this is on a 3-year rolling basis, so you will now be able to see June 18, you'll be able to see the 2017 data, and we'll get a trend showing here, hopefully, and we can see what's happening in the kind of the wider industry. I'm going to touch on the idea of consent, because that's something which comes up quite a lot in terms of, you'll be familiar that, for example, it's mandatory in the US. It is not mandatory for healthcare professionals to give their consent to disclose this information in the UK under data privacy. In 2015, we had 109 companies disclosing information, and of the individuals that those companies worked with, 55% of them gave their consent for us to publish that data. We had 115 companies in 2016, and that consent rate increased to 65%. So 65% of those individuals that those 115 companies worked with gave their consent. So we at the ABPI only publish on Disclosure UK the names and details of those people which the companies have permission or they feel legally able to share this information with us. Great news is it's going up, but there's a lot of work to be done actually in terms of increasing that, because although I've said quite simply Disclosure UK is a database, actually it's much more complicated than that. Disclosure UK is actually about transparency. It's about being transparent about the great work that happens between healthcare professionals, healthcare organisations, the pharma industry, in order to develop and deliver medicines. That's basically what this is about. It is an IT project, if you need to give it a title, but it's a transparency initiative. And that's the most exciting thing about it, which is why it's important to look at the consent rate as an indicator of how we're achieving and where we're going. So the what and the why now come together in terms of why we're doing this, because we are doing this as part of our journey to be considerably more transparent about the work that we do. So it started in 1958 with the first ABPI Code of Practice. And you can see with this timeline here, we're coming down now to 2017. So the first payments to healthcare professionals and healthcare organisations were disclosed formally in 2012 as part of an aggregate total that we had to share. So all pharmaceutical companies had to publish an aggregate total in 2012. That has developed through EFPIA, through the ABPI and other national associations to where we are today, which is this individual level disclosure. And, you know, as it says there at the bottom, and beyond. So this is rolling, this will keep rolling. You will see 3 years worth of data, but where it goes next, who knows? Who knows where it goes next? I know where we're trying to take it, and I'll come on to that. The other very, very important thing about this work being connected to our, to being transparent, is actually the reputation of the pharmaceutical industry. So that's probably a session, a whole different session for this group in its own, but actually this does touch onto the reputation and improving the reputation, and it is something which we can see is working. So we've done some research with Comres last year, looking at the overall reputation of industry, which, as an aside, isn't as bad as everybody tends to think it is. But what you can see here, it very specifically, is the idea of this database, the platform for sharing the transparent information, is important to healthcare professionals, and it's important to medical students, who are obviously the next wave of healthcare professionals. It's very important to them. So 65% of medical students say it's important. Slightly fewer, 49% of actual healthcare professionals that we ask say it's important to them. And it is making a difference under the broader term of transparency to industry's reputation. You can see here in these two quotes, both patient groups appreciate it and think that it's a much needed step towards our openness with why we're doing it. It's not secret. It's not underhand, the work that we're doing with these or individuals or organisations. It's actually for the benefit of patients, but also wider society. You know, we need to work together, and it's something we should be proud of talking about. And HCPs also say to us, you know, we should be also equally proud to talk about that and recognise that we have worked with you, and as a result, you know, something great has been created and somebody's health has improved. What I would say, though, is that transparency needs to get wider and deeper in order to really affect reputation. And what we've heard back is actually that transparency around medicine pricing and the medicine development process would have a better, bigger impact than this alone. That's not to say we need to stop doing this. This is also now the hygiene factor. It's expected that we're open about this information, but actually if we could now kind of do something similar with pricing and meds development, then I think we might actually go some way to being even more transparent and even more supportive of a positive reputation. And in terms of disclosure of payments, it now isn't just the pharma industry. So previously, when we started this back in 2014 with EFPIA, it was very much, particularly in those countries where there was no law to mandate it to happen, it was a pharmaceutical industry driven initiative. We were trying to make it happen. Now actually in the UK specifically, we're bringing a whole raft of organisations related to healthcare professionals with us on this journey who equally think this is important. So ABPI's Chief Executive Mike Thompson attended the Task and Finish group for the NHS conflicts of interest. I'm actually now on the Scottish NHS Short Life Working Group for exactly the same thing, about how we can ensure that NHS staff view what we're trying to achieve in the same way and that they think it is appropriate to give their consent to disclose this information. So here you can see just an excerpt from the actual guidance that's now published from the NHS. And equally, we have others who are agreeing with us also. So the GMC joint statement that was released on conflicts of interest backs this up exactly, suggesting that their membership should consider disclosing in an appropriate way. The Academy of Medical Royal Colleges, backed heavily by the Royal Pharmaceutical Society and the Royal College of Physicians, absolutely are on board with saying, you know, it is the appropriate thing. If you've worked with industry, that you should be disclosing it. There's nothing wrong with it. So let's just get it out in the open. And the NICE consultation, which is actually still out for consultation, you can see here in the green bubble, is saying exactly the same thing. That if you have something to disclose, you should be disclosing it using Disclosure UK, because that is the appropriate initiative that's currently in place. So what does that all mean for our future? Well, the ABPI is working very, very closely with the NHSE now in terms of trying to achieve 100% disclosure by 2020. So that is 3 disclosure years if we think of it being in arrears. There is no law in the UK that mandates this to happen. This is very much a hearts and minds exercise for us all coming together to agree, if we work together to create something that helps society and helps the health of the nation, then we should be pleased to talk about that and promote that and be open and transparent about it. And that is where we're aiming for with the NHS. So they will be working with us and we'll be working with them to encourage NHS employees to consider giving their consent. Currently, there is no plan for a change in the law, so there will be the GDPR, the new regulation coming in from Europe next year, which is actually slightly tighter than our current data privacy laws. So I don't envisage there being a change to UK data privacy law outside of that in the near future. So actually, we need to be working together to do this in a self-regulated way in order to keep this idea and momentum of transparency and openness about the relationships that we have going. Thank you very much for listening. If you want any more information, please feel free to contact me and my team about Disclosure UK.